Welcome to Flight Simulator. My name is Ben Pearson, the Roadster Tracker, and today I want to give you the basics on how to play this game. This is a flight simulator that's using sci-fi type themes. Pretty much all of the planes in here use some kind of a rocket type system, and it takes place on another world. You get some really beautiful scenery. It's a pretty neat looking game, and I think it has a lot of potential, but it can be a little bit difficult to get started with. So I want to go ahead and show you a couple tips. Now, the first tip is you want to get used to the basics of flying first. Don't worry so much about making money. Why is this important? You're probably going to crash a bit. Every time you crash, you lose a little bit of money. If you lose money and you get into the negatives, it's really hard to recover from there. So if you want to go ahead and get rid of that, what you can do is go to this menu, the profiles, and you can either push the delete key, or if you have a gamepad, you can push the Y button. Push it a number of times, and it deletes. And now we have a brand new profile. So now we're going to go ahead and start a brand new game. I wish there was an easier way to do this, but there's not. So it knows that we're using the gamepad. It may or may not do this when you're first doing this, but you can go through the different help systems. It'll tell you what you need to do, tell you how to align it, but I'm going to kind of go through this, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on it. Now, the first thing to notice is you're on a landing pad. Now, these landing pads have a couple of things. You can either charge your spacecraft, which is probably better translated as refuel, or you can trade cargo, either buying or selling stuff, and try to make some money. It's one of a couple of different ways you can make money in the game. You can take on contracts to carry cargo from point A to point B. Sometimes you can find cargo and then sell it. You can also take passengers and bring them from point A to point B, which is kind of just a different type of contract. Those are the ways that I've found so far to make money. But, you know, money is important. You can see at the upper right we have $2,500, which is enough to get started. Now, for some reason with the trading, you actually have to line up properly. You'll notice that it turned yellow. That means I was in the right orientation, but I needed to stop. So I pushed the A button here on my control pad, and you can see the different types of things. The only thing we can buy here is some batteries, and we don't have any cargo on our spacecraft to sell. But there is this little strange box that we can see in our radar display that is really close, and you can actually see it on the screen here. So go try to back into this box. Now I'm going to change the camera angle so that we can see this better using the right hand joystick. The camera controls are not always the best, and the moving is very difficult in my opinion. It should be a little bit easier to move on the ground. Now if I push the down arrow on the gamepad, the D-pad, you can see that it has this little circular area. Anything that is in there can be picked up. So I can see that that box is there and picked up. If I push the left-hand arrow, on the D-pad, then we'll go ahead and pick this up. It's free cargo. We may as well do it, and we can see that what it is B2 rations. Okay, that's great. So what can we do with these B2 rations? Well, we could take it here, and they're not really looking for them. So in fact, I think they sell them here. So they're probably not going to fetch a very high price. But if we look over here, we can see that, hey, these guys want some rations. This is awesome. So if we can get them here to Central, then we'll be doing good. So we're going to go ahead and plot in Central. Now let's take a look around. A little bit hard to do with this camera control. You can see there's another base over here. We're just going to go ahead and hop over to that base just to kind of practice. So let's go ahead and push the right hand trigger to thrust. Now I really highly recommend you get going up fairly high before you start going into the flight modes. What you can do is you control this with your left hand joystick. You can control the camera with the right hand. Now, straight forward will bring you having a faster forward speed. The back arrow will have you slow down like I'm doing right now. I should have closed my cargo bay there. Your right-hand trigger will be how much thrust you're doing. I really wish this had support for a proper flight simulator joystick, but it does not. I tested it out, it supports a few things, but the throttle control is really amazing with a good flight simulator setup, and this game doesn't really have that. The left and right arrows, of course, will turn you around. They work pretty well. You want to kind of come in nice and slow. Once you see that landing gear and you're moving relatively slow, you can just go ahead and let go. A hard landing won't hurt you too badly, although I'm going to try to do it nice and soft. Good. Now, most of the time you probably want to land in the destination point because that's where you can do trading, but I wanted to land here because we're actually going to go somewhere different. We're going to pull into this repair bay that you can see here. Anytime you see a white thing on the ground in a square or plane shape, it's probably somewhere where you can go. Looks like we're probably bumping up against this a little bit. The driving on the ground does not work the best. You can do it, but it's challenging, in my opinion, a little bit harder than it needs to be. Now, this one, you don't actually have to face the right direction. You just get the plane into the circle. It goes yellow and then green, just like the trading circle that we did. And this is how you can repair your plane, and you can also get upgrades. So we don't have any money, and we just barely flew, and we had a fairly nice touchdown and no real events, so we don't really have anything, but let's just go ahead and take a quick look in here. So if we wanted to repair, we would hit the X button, but you can see everything is 98% or better, so we're just fine. We're going to go ahead and get out of this. There's no way to skip the animation that I've been able to find. If you want to get fuel, you do it from the trading port. You just have to push the X button to refuel, and you keep holding it until it has the right amount. I say fuel, the game calls it charge, but we know that batteries don't change their mass at all. So, you know, an electric car has a charge to it. The amount of mass that is lost when it is discharged is very minimal. So, where we're going to sell this, we'll push the select button, we'll pull up the map, and we're going to go to Central. Okay, so we can see where it is. It's almost directly behind us. So I'm going to go ahead and push the right trigger. There we go. If you push the right trigger in, or the right joystick in, you get into what my opinion is the best mode for flying around. Although the camera sometimes is a little bit lacking, camera control. But it's an early access game and it's coming along fairly well. Now you see this volcano, we want to stay far away from that. We're probably a little bit too close as it is, but we'll be fine. So we got a fair ways to drop. We probably came in a little bit high. You can see Central straight ahead because it's above on our little radar display. We're kind of going down a little bit, which is good. There's some very intricate wind patterns. If you push the Y button when you are in flight, you can see what some of these are. Now, we're a little bit high. By a little bit, I mean a lot. You can see what our airspeed is on the upper right. You see it's going down and we're getting close to the landing zone. We're probably coming in a little bit too hot. Now, you do not have to land at all in the orientation because you can always taxi. So, but I'm actually fairly close, which is quite helpful because taxiing can be difficult. Coming in slightly too hard, but actually no, that was perfect. Usually I like to be a little bit more cautious. I'm that kind of person. So we're going to back in and turn a little bit into our space. So we're going to sell the rations that we picked up. Okay, so we can sell it, and then it's going to pick them out of our spacecraft. You can't back out of this. Actually, you can. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. When you're loading, I think you have to sit there and wait for the animation to complete until it's fully loaded. But in this case, we didn't need to because we just stuck it out of the spacecraft and the robotic arm there continued. Now, what else can we do while we're here? If we look here, there's not a whole lot here. We could get some empty batteries and we could take them back to here want to sell. But let's look at some of the other bases. This one has a passenger, which is kind of interesting. Let's go ahead and check them out. We'll see how you do a passenger. So the winds do matter, but they're fairly gentle to begin with. You really don't want to fly in a cloud. It can be scary for many, many reasons. So I recommend you fly below the cloud layer, if at all possible. Stay away from the jets, as previously mentioned. They will do bad things. Now, you can see here that there's a sample. That sample is something we can pick up and sell too, if you stop on the side of a mountain to pick it up. Which can be challenging, but it works fairly well. Now, passengers don't come in the trading port usually. They usually hang out at a third type of square that you can find. See that kind of yellow square that's roughly where my tail is, and you can see that eye there is a person that's waiting to be picked up. So we're going to land right by that person. Actually, before we do that, we're going to refuel the aircraft because we haven't done that for a while, and we probably need to do that. So let's go ahead and do that. Yeah, you can see we're already on yellow charge. We probably want to have a full charge before we pick up anybody. And it looks like we slightly went over, but that's okay. Well, that was fun. So, I pushed the right-hand shoulder button, which is the non-trigger button that's on the right-hand side, and then you push A to accept. Now, they know that we're going to wait for them, but we're not particularly close. Unfortunately, that message came at a poor time because we were having some slight flight issues, but that is perfectly okay. It's to be expected in this game. Now we're going to back in to this parking spot. Again, it takes a little while. Sometimes I can get it to go straight backward really well and backward at an angle. Sometimes it only wants to go straight back and won't turn at all. But forward almost always will work to turn. So I kind of find that it can be best to get going forward in the right orientation, and then you just back into the right spot. The direction where you're at is pretty forgiving. The orientation is not. You'll get used to it with some time, though. So we go ahead and go here. We've got a green. So I'm going to hold down the X button to fully refuel the spacecraft to max charge. And there we are. So now we're going to go ahead and pick up our passenger. So luckily our passenger is relatively close. You can see that eye here. Some of them you will actually have to fly a little ways to get there. You can't get that close, but this one is intended to teach the mechanics, so it's pretty close. But basically, you can kind of see that white square with a circle in the middle of it. Anytime you have something there, there's a possibility to either do a contract mission or more likely pick up a passenger from there. So we'll go ahead and get here. Now, once you get there, how do you actually pick up the passenger? Well, you have to open your cargo bay just like we picked up the person. People, though, can walk, unlike cargo. So you push the down arrow, and you're just kind of close to the vicinity. It doesn't really matter. You can see the person's coming, walking in towards us. They don't want to get that close because they know we'll run over them. And they actually will just walk into your spacecraft if you've agreed to take them on as passenger. Now, they want to go to Bora, so we pull up our map. And there's Bora. Now, we can see necessary samples. We want a sample of natural flora, if we have it. or some protein rations. Is that anything we have? Nope, they don't have anything for sale. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and fly to Bora, and then we'll drop off our passenger and we'll call this good enough to teach the basics of the game. Now, while we're flying, there is a couple of different flight modes. One of them, and can be the easiest for most of the time, is just the standard direct control, where you have to sit and push the thrust button the whole time. But there is another one that can be useful. Since we're going a little way, we'll try this out. We're going to do the constant thrust. You push it with the left-hand joystick, and now you're going at a constant thrust, and you no longer have to hold down the trigger. I find this can be difficult to do over land because things like mountains and jet streams and bad stuff are a lot more likely to happen when you are flying over land, and so you tend to want to stay lower, and it can be a little bit hard to control your altitude very much when you are in that constant thrust mode, but it can be useful. This is not the best way to approach this. In fact, if I can... Yeah, good. Now there is updrafts and downdrafts and all kinds of stuff, so sometimes even at your max power, you'll stay put. Now these steam columns are relatively forgiving, much more forgiving than the... Whoa! And there we died. Poor passenger. But what you would do once you got there is you would push the down arrow, let your passenger come out, and then they would be able to get to their destination. You'd make a little bit of money. So now, when you're flying through here, you can watch this animation. It will take some time, but you'll be back to the ship trading port that we were at earlier. What you can also do if you want to, you can hit the escape button and exit to the main menu, and then load back into your game, and it will skip the animation, but you'll end up in the same spot. Now when we do this, they're going to charge us a little bit of money to pay for the insurance. Call it a deductible for our insurance. It's a couple $100, but they'll give us a brand new ship that was exactly the same configuration as before. You can see right here they charge us 345 credits. No big deal. Once you get out of here, you're fully refueled and fully repaired, and you are back to being able to do whatever it is you need to. Now, if you're dying a lot in the very early part of the game, like I sure was, then your $2,500 you start out with is going to go away pretty quickly. But you get used to flying around things eventually, and you can start to go visit other islands. One other key thing to mention real quick when you're flying here, if you push the select button when you're in air, it will highlight where all the cities are, and that can make it easier. You can clear it or highlight it. Especially when you're flying to a different island, that can be very, very helpful, because you can't see them on the map. The map doesn't pull up when you're flying, which is probably for the best. You probably want to do that when you're still on the ground, so we'll go ahead and land here at Bridgeport. And then we'll pull up the map and show what you can see there. But it's just a little different, and that's kind of interesting. I've never seen that kind of debris on the cargo bay. Very interesting. Anyways, when you're here, you can pull up the map and you can zoom out. Maybe we'll be able to see some of the other islands, but oh, here you go. You can see the other islands and you can plot to them as well. The trick is you use the left-hand trigger to zoom out. You see a very, very different alien-looking land here. This is much more forgiving where we're at, but you know, you got to start somewhere. Anyways, thank you much for joining me. Let me know whatever questions, comments you have. Let me know what tips you guys have for a new player for Flight Pilot Simulator. This is a really interesting game. I really love the visual work. Let's see if we can see it. You can see this is a moon from a gas giant. Yeah, there we go. You can see a ringed gas giant that we're orbiting around on a moon. And the scenery is really beautiful. This game has a lot of potential. I don't think it's quite there yet, but it's certainly going to be a really interesting game someday. And I look forward to seeing how it develops. Until next time, keep on tracking. Take care.